Hello, welcome to the August 1st, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, you realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions coming in. We will go through all the questions chronologically, and if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're using, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, if which version number, so if it's 12, 13, 14, and which operating system, so if it's for Windows or Mac OS, that information is helpful. We should also, several hours after the live stream ends, we should have an index with all of the topics covered in today's live stream, so you could quickly navigate to watch it afterwards and find particular topics. And if you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, we're now over 40,000 topics. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a wonderful site. We see that Jan is on. We also have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. And they're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate all of their efforts. We'll also give special recognition to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from the United States outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and we will go ahead and get started. All right. All right, so we see Jan from Cubase Index. We have Uno Memento checking in from a hot and humid Finland, where it's also lots of thunder and lightning sometimes. All right, we see Stefan checking in from Sweden. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude. We see VS Terranova from Amsterdam joining. We see Paul Claypool just saying hi and happy Friday to everyone. So question was, his first question is, I was wondering if there's any plans to add routing folders to Cubase. So there currently aren't routing folders in, but one thing that maybe, and we don't comment on future items, but a lot of times what we can do that a lot of people don't realize, just in case you're not aware of this, is to just kind of come over. So let's say I have a number of tracks that are available. I'll take these out of the folder. So there is a macro which will allow us to, so say I have these particular tracks. If we go to our macros that we could trigger, so if you go to edit menu to macros, we can just come over here and say selected tracks to new folder and add group channel, and then we could just come over here. So let's say we'll call this drums, and now they're all placed into a folder, and the folder is being, all of the tracks are immediately routed out to the drums. So in essence, this kind of gives you routing folders, but we'll see what happens in the future. I know people have sent their request in, but if you weren't aware of that macro, that could probably get you there, and with that functionality pretty quickly. All right, so we see Soren checking in from Sweden. We have Captenergy Music checking in from like outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Vince joining from, as Fly V joining from Winnipeg. We see John Costigan on from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have 7 Day saying happy Friday. All right, we have BB23 King saying hi, Greg. All right, we have Tony Trunzo sending greetings from Australia. All right, we have Virtual HALion checking in from Scotland. All right, and we have Raw Justice Hip Hop checking in from Capitol Heights. All right, and Bratman Studio says it's a beautiful day today in Uptown Whittier in Southern California. 70 degrees, clear skies, and he wants to welcome all Cubasers. Dwight Cunningham is checking in from the Bahamas, and he asked, Greg, can you explain the standalone HALion Sonic? All right, so when you HALion Sonic is a free instrument player that is available. So lots of people will go out and obviously perform live with different scenarios. So let me see if I have it installed, the standalone version. So if we want to come over here to applications, all right, so now I can just, so if, most of the times that we want to run within our Cubase environment, we would run HALion Sonic as a plugin so that all of the settings and changes are going to be stored within our Cubase project and we can call that up. But let's say we were going out and performing and doing a gig and we want to use HALion Sonic for live performance. So I'll come over here, open it up. All right, just allow a couple things. All right, so now it is a standalone program. So if I wanted to, come over here and say, okay, I want my MIDI keyboard to play this particular sound. So I want to come over, let's play the piano. So at this point, it is just a software instrument that is running entirely independently of Cubase. So, most people would do this for live performance use. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Dwight. And you could obviously kind of change the audio interface as well. So if you come over here to your settings, you could say, let's go to our ASIO driver, and we would just choose, let's say, and now as we play, we can just, so this way we could have kind of like a software, just a standalone software that you could run independently of Cubase. All right. All right, James Dalzell asks, hi Greg, using Cubase Elements, how do you change pages for quick controls using an audio plugin? Okay. Okay, so let's say we have a plugin. I'll just come here, let's say on our bass. And let's come over and let's go to our VST bass amp. So come over here, distortion, to our VST bass amp. All right, so now we're going to open up, and we can see that we have quick controls, and these quick controls will be kind of mapped to various parameters. But if we look at our remote control setup, so we come over here to the remote control editor, we can have banks and banks of parameters. So we could have page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, etc., depending on how many parameters are in the plugin. All right, so to map this, I need to get a coffee, sorry. To map these, we would come over to, let's say, our controller editor. And let's come over to your MIDI remote, and I will choose All right, so let's go ahead and map. Let's say I want to map to the next bank of controls. So I'm going to double click here. And I think if we come over to selected track, let me see where it's at. Just make sure it's not there. Okay. I did a video on this. I have to watch my own. All right, let me see if I can find out where it's at. But there's basically a way to go to the next mapping. That was under actions. Let me. All right, let me just go back to the plugin real quick and just see if I could just search for the. That was a mapping page. Let's just see. But there is a way to kind of to here choose the next bank. All right, just looking for the right term. I thought it was page. I'm just kind of having a, let's see if we go. I think it was under selected track. That would be under here. Let me just. Okay, so next plugin parameter bank. So when I come over here, I'm going to map this particular knob to next plugin parameter bank. And now this to the previous plugin parameter bank. So now when I come over here, just using the MIDI remote, I will just say, okay, let's go to the next plugin parameter bank and the previous plugin parameter bank. So come over here and you want to go to selected tracks, and under the inserts and strip effects, you can say, I think it's going to be the next plugin parameter bank and the previous plugin parameter bank. So you can map those to your controller, and then that will switch the banks of your various plugins for you. Sorry, it took me a while to find that again. All right, get my computer to wake up. All right. All right, so see Sarmad checking in from Manchester. Okay, BB23 King asks, I export a 2 MP3 track and they have different volume. What should I do to make them have the same volume? So if we have two different files that are the same, if you want to, so generally, you want to do the process before you export as an MP3, but let's say if we have two files that are different volume levels, so let's say if I take these two vocals and these vocals are at different levels. All right, so we'll just come here. So let's say these are going to be, so I'm just going to select this and I'll just do a quick process to change the level. Okay, so if we wanted to, we could, so say these are different levels and we want these to be consistent. You could try to select both of them, go to audio to processes, and then you could say, normalize, and we'll just put a value of like -6 dB, and then we could see that those will now even out. So if I want to come over here, we'll choose to delete that so we can see that this is going to be, this one track will be louder than this one, and I'll make this track, let's say, softer. So as we do this, let me just go to processes and we'll adjust our gain downward 6 dB. Okay, so if we want these to both be the same before exporting to an MP3, just come over, go to your audio processes, normalize, and then you could have both of those kind of come up to the same volume levels. So that's something that you could try. All right, so we got Anthony Clark just saying, hey, Greg and all from Canada, beautiful weather today. So yeah, we had a kind of a 30-degree temperature drop or 25-degree temperature drop in one day here in Washington, D.C. area. All right, Soren has a question, says, there's something very strange in my computer with ASIO guard involved. ASIO guard can be overloaded for some reason. Can you talk about that a bit? What does guard do and what stresses it? Okay, so we could think of different plugins, like when we look at our audio performance. So if we come over here, we'll say, let's look at our audio performance monitor. All right, so we see ASIO guard and we see real time. So if we had a number of plugins, let's say on this particular track, I want to we'll put a couple of like processor heavy plugins here. Okay, so it's kind of broken down. ASIO Guard, what it does is it kind of can separate tracks that are kind of recording or record enabled or monitored in real time versus tracks that are just playing back. So if you run into scenarios where, let's say, we will come over here to our audio performance meter, and so like as I take this particular track and let's record, enable, and monitor, and I will just kind of, we could see that the ASIO Guard may increase just because these tracks need to kind of fetch these particular inputs, these plugins. And let me see if I have my suspend VST3 enabled. No. Okay. So when tracks are record enabled or monitored enabled, and they have lots of plugins on it, those run at a lower latency, and how that's basically, and that could put more stress on the ASIO Guard meter in the audio performance meter. Whereas when you kind of take off the record input, the record enable or the monitor, then it's doesn't need to, I think the term they use is prefetch, to do all of that processing ahead of time, and this track can run at a higher latency value. So that's why you may notice that, so just simply turning off record enable or monitor on particular tracks may just kind of clear that up for you. All right, we see Mark Winslow checking in, saying aloha from Hawaii. I was thinking of you as we're watching the reports for a potential tsunami. Hope you're well. All right, so we see Vishnu, great to see you back, says, could you kindly explain how to connect a Behringer X-Touch 1 to Cubase? So generally when you connect it, most people would run it as, I believe that's just like the Mackie control. So if you want to run it as a Mackie control, if you come over here to your studio setup, we can just click on the plus sign here and you'll see a Mackie control. So you can choose Mackie control. Once you have a Mackie control configured, you could set the MIDI input and output ports for the Behringer. I'm assuming that you're connecting it via USB. So now you can just simply connect that via USB and select the input and output ports. If you have a Mackie control device that is, and you don't want to run it as Mackie control, you could run it as a MIDI remote, and that could give you more flexibility and kind of more dynamic operation inside of Cubase. And there's probably going to be, I'm sure that there are different templates that you could use so that you could import. So if we come over to your MIDI remote script, at this point you could just, if you search online, you could probably just look for Behringer, MIDI remote script. So once you click on the settings icon here, at that point we could just come over to import script, and then you can have it function as kind of a MIDI remote, and that gives you a lot more flexibility for mapping. All right, Channel Ripoff asks, hi Greg, I can't get direct routing to work. I'm trying to send a stereo signal to two different buses at the same time, and it just does not do it. When I select both, it comes out to one bus, not two. All right, so if we have let's say this track, so I want to add 2 different group tracks. Okay, so we'll come over here. So I'll just add 2 group tracks, and I want to send this track via direct routing to these 2 group tracks. Now there's one checkbox that you have to enable if you want to send it to multiple destinations. So right now I go to my direct routing, so I want to send this to group 1 or group 2 and to group 3. And when I do this, we can see that we could enable kind of one of these. All right, so go to your mix console, and you'll see just kind of in the little settings cogwheel where you could just choose direct routing summing mode. Turn that on, and now we could send it to 2 different buses. So now as we're kind of playing, let's say we'll take the bass part here. So now with the direct routing summing mode unchecked, it's only going to go out to one of the buses. But once we have that checked, so just make sure that you have then you'll be able to send it to multiple destinations. So once again, go to, and you could assign a keyboard shortcut to it if you want. Just come over to direct routing summing mode on, and then you could just simply place a check mark next to that. All right, so Rick France says, hi Greg, is there a simple way to take a project with VST MIDI orchestrations and turn it into a project that converts into a project with all audio tracks? Avoid doing it one track at a time. Yeah, so let's say if we have a project here, I'll just do a short section of one. Okay, so let's say we now have these going into, we have this going to, let me just, check, make sure it's the right project. All right. Sorry, just get this project. All right, so say we have all right, so when we come over here, these are going to different instruments. So you can see that we have our different instrument outputs here. So, we can see it kind of mixed here. So if we want to turn these, render all of these as audio, all you have to do is just simply, we'll come over here. And let's go to the export audio mixdown. And we'll select multi. So I'm going to say, let's take all of my instrument tracks that are MIDI. I'll just put this into the same project. So we'll create audio tracks, but we don't necessarily have to. And let me set the locators. So let's come over here and let's export the audio. And what it's going to do now is we can just see that we will have all of our violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, and bass. So that way, so again, all you have to do, so we could have a stereo mix and then the individual stems. So go to your file, to export audio mixdown. You'll see a multiple tab, and then you could just export all of your tracks and render them as audio based on the left and right locator positions. So let me know if that's helpful. Sorry, it took me a while to find a project. All right. Bratman Studio says, this is a bit of an off-the-wall question. Do you have Bluetooth or USB or app for a Galaxy phone that will let me start and stop recording from behind my drum set? Hard to get behind in 2 bars. Yeah, so check out the Cubase IC Pro remote. And then you'll be, I think I have it on my phone here, but that's just like a quick remote control app. So and you get on the Android Play Store, or for iOS, and that's just a simple app. You could trigger key commands, transport, and just connect it to the same wireless network that your computer is on, and then you could be behind your drum set or different parts of the house and automatically control your Cubase. So it's called Cubase IC Pro. So check that out. All right, so we see Jazz Dude shared a link for X-Touch. Thank you for doing that. Fun by 15 says, hi, Greg. So, hi back. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, my chat field just jumped. All right, cycling is awesome. Great to see you back. Says, hi, Greg. How can I run a MIDI track in double time two times faster than the project? Okay, so let's take our violin part here. All All right, so if we want this to be twice as fast as a project, we could use the logical editor. And I think that there's a preset for it, but I'll show you how to make one if I don't mess up. So let's get to the logical editor. All right, so we want to transform notes, and we want their position. We'll say multiply by 2, and their length multiply by 2. Or I guess we want it to be divide by 2, multiply, divide, so all right, so now when we do this, I could just take this track here. And then we could also do this for not only just notes, but we could also say, take our MIDI and we'll say type our MIDI controllers. And we could just come over here and take our controllers and the notes and divide by 2 as well. So, so if you want to do that, just kind of come over. You want to say type is equal to note, position, divide by 2, or you can multiply by 0.5, length, divide by 2, and then you take all right, so now we run this function, and now we're twice the speed. We undo. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Fun by 15 says, hi Greg, TB from the UK here. What is the best way of backing up a project and collecting all referenced audio, including drum machine and sampler tracks and recorded audio for moving between machines? Okay, so let's say we're going to start a new project here. All right, so we'll create empty, and we'll put it into an August 1st folder. Okay, so we'll come over here. So we have a brand new project. Let's record an audio file. All right, so this audio file, when you look at it, we'll go to our pool, and we'll see that this is going to be recorded directly into our Hangouts folder, into August 1st folder. All right, so that's kind of as expected. So let's say I want to now incorporate my drum machine and sampler tracks. All right, so when we come over, let's go to our, let's say we'll add a track to the sampler track. All right, so I'm going to right click and let's create a sampler track. So now we have this, and we look at our particular pool window again, Control or Command plus the letter P. We'll see that the sampler track is now added to the pool, and we'll see that that's automatically added to the particular folder. Now the drum machine, let's go ahead and add a drum machine, and let's drop that sample. So we'll add a drum track, and I'm going to take that. So let's look at our pool again. And we can see, okay, under plugins, and we can say drum machine, that this is going to a different folder. Okay, so this is maybe like where the original folder for that file is from. So now if we notice that these files are in different folder locations, and this could also go for Pad Shop or Groove Agent, if we have like the components that are built in, these will reference the audio files. What we could do is just come over here, let's go to the audio, and we will just say prepare archive. All right, so this drum kit, we're using this sample that's not in the particular, that's in a completely different folder. So now right click, prepare archive, we'll proceed, and we'll say okay. And now we notice that that drum track has automatically been moved into the August first folder. So that way it moved it into the project folder automatically. And then we could just do our typical file menu to back up project. And then that would include all of, I would save this first, since we haven't saved a project. So now we go to File, to Backup Project, and now all of those files that were used in the drum machine, the sampler track, or in the audio will now be within the audio folder. And when we look at it, so let's just do a quick backup here. And I'll do it to my desktop. We'll create a new folder. Okay, so we'll look at that folder now, where our backup is. We'll go to our audio, and we'll notice that we have our 3 different files that will automatically be included there. So, all right. All right, so we see Rick France checking in from Pacific Northwest. He said he asked a question before checking in. All right, let's see. Okay, so I think we covered that with MIDI orchestration. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see from FlyV, says I was just using lanes on different takes with my device with punch in and punch out, and they all mute. So generally the concept with the lanes is once we come over here, we go to our audio track, okay, and let's say if we're going to do a quick punch in, all right, so let's open up our lanes. And now every time, so the concept of a lane is we have one voice that plays on the audio track. So when we come over here and we record, all right, so we go back, let's say we punch in, that is the current voice is the active one. And that will mute the other way. So there can only be one. So we have one track that's playing, and then at this point, we have one track that's playing. So you only have one voice, so that we don't hear every single one of the voices as we perform. So So, that's kind of the intention of it. And at that point, we can, generally we don't have it set up so that it's actually, it's set up so that you hear one event. So let me respond to a quick email. Sorry about this. All right, so next question. All right, so you see Flyveed wishing everyone happy Friday, and he says he's all coffeed up. BB23 King says that was helpful, but I mean after exporting an MP3 volume for both track is different. One have high volume, the other one has low volume. So if, so while before, so if the track's mixes are different, that could lead to kind of inconsistent volumes. But if you go to the mix console, see what happens if you import both tracks directly if you import both tracks back into the project. So maybe it's the project settings that are kind of causing more of the issue. So if you wanted to check like the actual project, so it's maybe the mix settings are different. So if you wanted to look into that, all right. All right, hang on one second. I have to respond to a quick email from someone that just is trying to. Bear with me one moment. Just trying to get a question into the stream. Bear with me just a second. Respond to this attendee. All right, sorry about that. All right. Okay, so we see Rochester's Hip Hop is running in X-Touch 1. So John Costigan says, has breaking news, just in, please press the like button. We see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, from a hot, cloudy, maybe rain a bit north of Texas area. All right, we see Michael Teams has granted John Costigan 1 gallon of pink strawberry lemonade ice cream. That's a good flavor for a hot day. All right, so we have Milton Rojas saying hello to everyone from La Paz, Bolivia, South America. Thanks for joining us today. All right, see Val's on his way home from his shooting, but now everybody in the car has to listen to the stream. All right, so we see from George, is there any way to manipulate the sends from a track, e.g. adding delay or plug-in before the signal reaches the destination, but without influencing the track's output? Okay, so I was just watching Warren Huart mentioning this, one reverb for all tracks, but sending to it with various pre-delay settings. So I guess I'm not sure if you could do, all right, so let's just come over here. So let's say we have our audio track, and let's add our send to it. All right, so we go to our sends. All right, so if you want to all right, so is there a way to manipulate the sends from a track, example, adding delay or a plug-in before the signal reaches the destination? I guess you could come over, so let's say, okay, so this is going to send, but let's say if we send this to a group, all right, so if we wanted to do this, we could send this to the group. All right, so let's say, okay, so now this is sent to a group. This group, then, so instead of this going to there, we could say, okay, I want to send it to a group, and now I want to put a delay. So let's say, okay, I want a studio delay before the reverb. And if you want it, so if we do it kind of this way, we could take the send. So this audio is going out to the group. The group can go directly to a delay that is fed before the reverb. And since this is in series, you could kind of manipulate and just have, if we just adjust the feedback on the reverb, so you could adjust the delay time here, so it doesn't necessarily have to be synced. So if you want it to be a very small delay, so that you could have various pre-delays for that. So it kind of seems more like a solution looking for a problem to me. But if you wanted to accomplish that, I think that would do it for you, George. All right, so you see from Val, it says, what can I do with the scripting tab in the lower zone, or what programming language is it in? And are there default commands? I don't know. I just found out about this yesterday. So if you want to go to in the MIDI remote, I'm not a developer at all. I'm kind of developing software development dumb myself. But if we want to come over, think that we could access kind of the scripting tool. See where we access it. If it's, I thought it was an icon. But as far as the programming language, I'm not. I remember I said what I thought the programming language was once, and then I was wrong on it. So, but let me just see if it's. But it's basically an API so that you could do more extensive MIDI remote control, so that values from the control can be like, if you wanted to send metering from the channel and have that pass, or whatever the particular value was of a channel, that could be shown on the MIDI remote controller as well. So that's kind of what this scripting tool allows you to do. So let me just see if we go into more of the setup. But that's kind of the intention of the scripting tool, and I thought you could access it from down here. Let me just see if we're in different modes. Oh, okay, so I'm going to access the scripting tool here. So, and then if you want it to open up the MIDI remote script, and I think that we could actually take you to like a web page, which is about the MIDI remote API. Excuse me, I had a sneeze. All right. So I think it might be in Java. Let me just, so you can see this is kind of so that you could do more detailed MIDI remote integration with this. So we'll kind of walk you through that. All right. So you see Michael Teams is giving 1 gallon of chocolate cherry mash ice cream to Uno Momento. All right, so we have Sound Foundry Studios is back for a short visit. Thanks for joining us today. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, Vince asked, I have a device with lots of pads on separate channels and they need mapping to an XY axis in MIDI remote section to move along with what's pressed. Is that possible? So many pads that you hit, if you have like a controller that has, like if I go to my Nectar here, I have pads that are used for kind of drum pads. So often these pads themselves just kind of trigger a note on, note off message. And they don't necessarily have a sense of where your finger is on the XY position. But if you have a device that, you know, can recognize the XY, I think Korg has a small controller that can recognize, that has like an XY control on it, then I think if we come over, let's say that you could then add it in the MIDI remote. So if you go to an XY pad here, we can just come over and add the XY pad so that, you know, different values can be mapped on one axis versus another axis. But generally, drum pads on MIDI controllers don't offer that, even though it has a shape where you think that you could move. The vast majority of them, I would say, you know, by rule of thumb, that most of the drum pads won't do that, but you'll see different synthesizers and particular controllers that have an XY pad, and then you could map that directly here. And then when we go into, let's say, our device, then we could map the parameters, so you could have an XY pad or an XY joystick if you want, just right there. Okay, so we see from Rick France says, thanks Greg, we'll try that exporting audio into a new mixdown project. So you could do a brand new project or folder or into the project, keep it all nice and consolidated if you need it. All right, we see Matt Elston joining. Thanks for being online with us from, I think, London area. Jazzy was kind enough to post a Cubase IC Pro manual. And Matt Elston has received 1 gallon of French vanilla ice cream. All right, Jazz Dude's letting everyone know that Spectral Layers 12 trial version is out. And And Jazzy is also sharing that Gary Gibbons, who does amazing sound design work for many Steinberg instruments, his new Extreme library. All right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin. It says he's out of the studio today, and it says hit the like and woof. Catch y'all next time. So we give a big woof to Stella, and we hope, I don't know if you're back from North Carolina or not. All right, Flyvy asks, what's the way of making my last lane during takes unmute only? So generally, like as you're doing takes, so if we come here, we put this in a cycle, and so we'll come over here, we'll just hit record. Let's see, let me just go to the right. All right, so as we do this, we put it in cycle. Sorry, just switch my keyboard over to the right computer. All right, so now we'll punch in. So, you know, as we do, just a quick, let's do it on new track here. Just. So you see that the other track is automatically, so the last track is going to be active. So, all right. So, and you say, okay, what's the way of making my last lane during takes unmute only? So generally, you know, it's automatically doing that. So, you know, you can see that as we record it. And if you wanted to select a different take instead, if you just select the comp tool, and then you could just select which particular take or which portion of a take that you want to work with. So at that point, you could build up your comp like so. Let me know if that's helpful. All right, we see Radar the band is seeking rain in Dallas area. All right, Michael Pierce says, wishing everyone a happy Friday. I mean, Jazzy's also posted a link to, I think Dom Segalis did a Legends expansion for Extreme as well. All right, we see Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. Hope you're well. Thanks for being online with us this morning for you. Okay. All right, Traden asks, what's the latest version of Cubase? Is it still 14.032? Yes, that's the latest version. So, all right, you see Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma, Arizona. All right, so we see Fun by 15 says, another thing I ran into this week, what is the correct process for setting up custom expression maps, i.e. for contact instruments? I also struggle with seeing them in the CC lanes in the MIDI editor. All right, so let's say we want to make a quick expression map. So I want to come over here. Let's choose, let's do a quick. All right, so we'll have a clarinet. Okay, so if we want to figure out kind of what all you would have to do is just come over and we go to the MIDI menu to expression map setup. So let's say we want to make a new expression map. So we'll call this our clarinet. All right, so once we do this, we can say, okay, we want to do key switches. Do we want it to be probably in latch mode? And let's add an articulation. So we'll say, okay, when we look at our particular instrument, we can see that C0 is staccato. And if we come over here, C#0 will be marcato. So let's say sustain. Okay, so all we would have to do is say, okay, we come over here and say, okay, our pitch is going to be C0. And we could give it a name. So let's say short. And let's say that slot 2 here is going to be let's say D0 on the instrument. We'll say sustain. All right, so we could save. So we could kind of go through each of the different articulations, kind of like that. We could add kind of like, okay, we're going to do, different output mapping. So then all we have to do to load up the articulation, so we'll save clarinet. And when we go to an actual track to load an expression map, we could just come right over here to the bottom. So we would choose the expression map from here. So say, okay, let's go open up our clarinet. So we see the expression map. So we can switch between the two different articulations. And then we choose to have articulations and dynamics on the bottom there. So that's what you need to do. So just kind of switch it there to your articulations. All right. But check online, because there's probably people who've made expression maps for instruments. Like most Contact instruments probably have expression maps floating around somewhere that you could download. All right, Brian Sawyer is wondering if Michael Pierce had his hair colored this week. It's usually a highlight of the Zoom social meetups. I'll have it, and Michael Pierce responds, he'll have his hair dyed for the next Zoom. All right, so we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. Thanks for being on today. His cat Buddy is waving hello to my cat Steven, who's usually on my couch, but he's not today, and other pets that are nearby. All right, Jordi Dalmau asks, hi from Barcelona. When I want to use legato and MIDI notes and the notes are longer than the next one, Cubase doesn't do perfect legato. It is longer than the next note. How do I solve this? Okay. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay. Just take the snap off. Okay, so let's say we have okay, so let's say we have these MIDI notes here that aren't lined up. Says I want to use legato in MIDI notes and the notes are longer than the next one. All right, so let's just come over here and let's just go to MIDI and we'll go to our functions to legato. All right, so let's see when this note ends. It's going to be at 3.13. So let's see when this one starts. So it doesn't starting at the same time. So let's say this is ending at 4:103. We'll see when this one starts. So, but when we look at it, it doesn't seem like it's extending out to the next note. So let me know if it's if that's the legato function that you're doing, but it looks like it's not extending beyond. So we come over here to MIDI, and then we could just say, okay, let's get to your functions to legato. Now, I think there is a preference for legato to be aware of. So let's say we go MIDI editing. So you could also just have the legato mode between selected notes only, if you wanted to, versus all notes. But that seems like it's not overlapping to me. So let me know, Jordi, if that's how you're doing the overlapping or the legato function. All right, we see Terry Gray. Great to see you on, Terry. Hope you're well in Minneapolis area. Says, hey, Greg, I spent a lot of time assigning ratings to my favorite sounds in the various Steinberg plugins on my desktop. Is there a way to save and transfer them to my laptop install of Nuendos? I think what you could do is just export. If you go into the MediaBay, well, I don't think that you'll see like a MediaBay database, like a MediaBay.db file. And I think if you transfer that over, so let's come over to, we'll go to Finder and hold down if you go to your Go menu, hold down your option to Preferences, or to Library rather, and then to Preferences. And then if we go to Cubase 14 or Nuendo 14 in your case, I think if we just copy over, there will be like a could be, I think there's like a media .dd file. Let me just take a quick look. Yeah, try copying over like the MediaBay 3.db file from the preferences, and I think that will carry over all of your ratings assignments for you. All right, the Real Winslet fan asks, I'm trying to make a script to mirror CC data to my new Lugen controller, but the API seems to be lacking a tap on that. I have a workaround to try, but I don't like it. So if you're trying to make a script where, the MIDI remote script is, you want this to do MIDI remote, and then you want it to kind of hit a button and turn off and on CCs. You may have to go into the settings and go to, if you come over here and let's say, okay, we go to our Korg Nano control, and then I think that you could just simply, if you go to scripts here, that you could choose to disable the controller script, and then it'll spit out whatever CCs, and then when the controller script is turned on, that those CCs will function as MIDI remote. So many controllers may have like a bank switch, so you hit one button and the 8 faders are putting out, let's say, CCs 1 through 8. Hitting our button, it's putting out CCs 9 through 16, and our button 17 through 24. So if your controller does something like that, you could say, I want to use faders, CCs like 1 through, I want to use the first 2 banks for my MIDI remote and bank 3 for MIDI CCs. So that way you can hit a button and you just have access to MIDI CC layer, and the other layers could be assigned to MIDI remote functionality if you don't want to disable the script. I'm not familiar with that particular controller, but if you want to send me a link to it, I could see if that has that functionality. So a lot of keyboards, I think the Arturia controllers do that as well, which is a great feature. So we see from Val says, thanks, Greg. I thought it was more about the audio, but this is exclusive or even remote exclusive. It's not like the scripting tool in Reaper, right? Yeah. So generally we like to actually program for the customer so that they don't have to do their own programming with our program. So. But yeah, it's going to be kind of a different intention. All right, next question we have from Kuthka is it possible to assign a CC note in MIDI remote, like assigning a note on a pad? Certainly. So all you have to do is just simply, play a particular MIDI note. So let's say if I want to come over here to my panorama, so you can see that I have my pads, and we could assign these pads to different remote control functions. So, or just a single key. So if you wanted a key that all it did was stop and start, you could, have the very top key or very bottom key do transport functions. So, that key won't be able to be used to transmit, like to play MIDI instruments, but you could have it mapped to various control functionality, certainly. All right, so we have Up Close saying hi from Tokyo. Thanks for joining us. We usually don't get too many live attendees from Japan. Thanks for being online. I know it's the middle of the night there. So we see from up close says, I know you can use a logical editor to select notes and set their CC values, but is it possible to use a logical editor to set a CC value at the current cursor position? I don't think so. It's more about kind of processing and manipulating existing data as opposed to generating. But let me just take a quick look just to make sure I'm not misspeaking. So let's say if we want to insert, so let's say I want to come here, let's say a measure 17. All right, so let's say if we come here, yeah, so I don't think it's going to insert. Probably what you can do is if we come over, let's see if we can, if we have this selected, and let's see if we go to the MIDI plugin. There's a MIDI control plugin. Let's see if we could get that. And this may put it at the beginning of the track, but let's see if we could select it. So we'll go here to the MIDI control. So let's say I want to put breath control in 66. And let's see if I select that and we choose freeze MIDI modifiers. So I think it's going to input it into the very first event. But yeah, so I don't think the logical editor is like really for inputting, but let me see if we could. If we have this at the beginning, if we yeah. So you could try playing around with the MIDI modifiers, but I don't think the logical editor is really designed for inputting data like that. Okay. Okay, so you see, for example, could you use the further clarification I probably should have read. So, for example, could you use a logical editor, set CC64 sustain pedal to 0 just after a note's end? So one of the things that you could do, like if you find that the sustain pedal isn't kind of, I think that there is like a sustain to, so let's say we have our here, let me see if I could just record it in. All right, so let's say if we have a sustain pedal message now. All right, so let's say, I think one of the things that you could do, so it may not automatically insert that, but I think if we go to, it might be under MIDI functions, that you could say pedals to note length. So, maybe if you want, you could try that particular function. So let's say if I move, let's see if we have to select the notes here, but try going MIDI functions and then the pedals to note length. So you could maybe experiment with that. I'm not sure if it's contingent on grid or selections. Sorry about that. All right, Jonathan Eggle asks, I'm recording guitar using a mic via audio interface in Cubase 13 Pro. I'm using headphones to listen to the Cubase metronome, but it's like quite in my headphone mix. How can I make the metronome louder? So there's a couple different ways of doing it. So one is just to come over, if you're using the control room, you may, and this is changed graphically, but you may have to kind of click on, there may be I think it's called the main tab here, and if you click on that, then you could expose different parameters. Here we can see levels, and so once we have the click turned on, there's a click level that you could set directly here in the control room. So look, if you're using the control room, to just kind of set the click volume right there. You could also just, let's say we have our left and right locators set. If you wanted to go to your project menu to a signature track, you could say render audio click between the left and right locators. And then that will just make an audio file and of the click track, and you could increase gain, run it through like an expander, come over for clip gain to make your click track super loud if you wanted to. All right, wonderful to see Gerald HALion. All right, with Diamond District Studios, checking in from South Africa, Cape Town. All right, so we see, hello Greg and Chad, I'd like to upgrade to Spectral Layers 12 Pro. My current copy says Spectral Layers 1/10. What upgrade option do I use to get current? The listed options are confusing on the site. So generally, like Spectral Layers 1 often comes with Cubase. So there may not be an upgrade from that since it was included with your Cubase license and you didn't buy a specific license for it. But let's take a look and check. Like if you had Spectral Layers elements, then since you bought into Spectral Layers, at that point you could upgrade from there. So let's just say, okay, let's go to, all right, so now we have the trial version, as Jazz Dude had mentioned in, all right. All right, so come here to Spectral Layers. All right, so it's by Spectral Layers 12. So let's say, if you want the Pro version, so let's see if we go for an updates. Let's see if there's updates from Go. Okay, so if you're upgrading from Spectral Layers Go, you could get it for $299. So, not sure if, let's say full version, so $349. So you could save $50 for that. So if you get updates and upgrades, so if you go to Spectral Layers Go, and that's the kind of the OEM version, you could then upgrade to the Pro for $299. And if you wanted to do Spectral Layers Elements, that would be less. So let's just come over and say, okay, we want to get Spectral Layers Elements. At that point, we could upgrade and update. It doesn't look like there's a special discount from Spectral Layers Go, but you save $50 just for being kind of a Steinberg user with the Pro version. So the one you want to use is going to be this update, and it could be different monetarily because of local currencies. But if you want this Spectral Layers 12 Pro, get updates and upgrades, and you want to upgrade from Spectral Layers Go, and then you could just add to the cart. But in the US, it's $299, and that's going to be different depending on your local country. All right. All right, so a question from Russ. It says, any suggestions for setting a project folder and project name automatically? I always save in the same folder, but like to name the project folder and project name based on today's date. So what I would do is, as you're doing that, so there's not an automatic, there is, if you wanted to do it automatically, it's probably always going to be a good idea. I would always suggest not doing it because it's so easy to get in the wrong file. So let's say if we go to new project, if you say use default location, okay, then you could automatically put it into a particular folder that you want. So we can say, okay, it's going to go into my August 1st backup. And then the project file name, you could just come right over here. Now, as you do that, there is a good chance that you may have multiple projects with the same audio file names in the same folder. So, what you think is, vocal 1, you may have a vocal 1 that's in 10 different projects. So if you wanted to do that, you could place everything here and have the project folder set if that's what you want to do. So this would give you kind of a unique project folder, and you could just type in today's date right there. I would always suggest manually, just so that you kind of take ownership and know where the files, where the project folder is located. I personally would always recommend doing it just like this, where it prompts you for the project. it prompts you to define a project folder and you to save the project. But if you want everything to go into a common folder and then have a unique project folder, we could just do that by selecting this option in the hub. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we have Razel Zimini checking in from Denmark. All right, we see Quellen says how to change the length of MIDI notes in the key editor of multiple channels by only selecting one channel with the overlapping chord sequence. All right, so let me see if I understand the question here and reread it again. How to change the length of MIDI notes in key editor of multiple channels by only changing one channel with the overlapping chord sequence. So let me just see if I could create that. Let me just duplicate the track here. Okay, I'll just drop a couple chords in. All right, so I'm just going to drop these particular chords into the event. Here, I'll just it's the audio track. All right. Sorry about that. Having a brain cramp. All right, so let's say we have chords, and now we have MIDI notes here. So let's all right, and I'll just change the colors here so we can see them both in the editor better. Okay, so let's say we're doing our edits. And we will colorize by part. All right. So you want to change the length of MIDI notes to key editor of multiple channels by only changing one channel with the overlapping chord sequence. So let's say this is our overlapping chord sequence here. All right. I'll just move this track down below. I'm just going to take these notes and move them up an octave here. So they're in a different range. Okay, so let's say we have these notes here, and we have this event. So you want to change the length of MIDI notes in the key editor of multiple channels by only changing one channel with the overlapping chord sequence. So do you want these to map to the length of this chord? So let me know if that's what you want to do. So I don't know of an automatic way of doing it. I mean, we could obviously come over and choose to if we wanted, if we know what I guess let's see if we come over here, let's select this event. And let's open up maybe a quantized panel, and let's say we drag this event into the quantized panel. And let's go to this event and say I want to quantize based on this. So we could quantize kind of based on those events. But we could also, if we go to your edit menu, you could choose to, quantize the event lengths as well. So that could be something. So let me know if that's kind of along the lines of what you want to do. Maybe if you get asked a question a little differently, I could understand it better. Sorry for being dense. All right, so Val's just asking, I want to make a custom MIDI remote for the Stream Deck XL. How would I do that? The one I bought has way too many buttons and options. So I'm currently, and I showed this on the Zoom social meetup, something I've been working on the last week or two is kind of a monster Stream Deck profile. So let's say if I want to, so I would maybe wait. So let's say if we come over here, we could say I'm kind of working on kind of a big Stream Deck profile. So basically I set it up so that you could download a MIDI utility so that on the Stream Deck, I'll just open up the Stream Deck software so you can see it. There's a MIDI utility, and then you could basically turn the buttons into various MIDI messages. And then I set up like 128 notes here in the MIDI remote. And so what I have done here, so let's say I'll leave this open. So we could access kind of transport functions in Cubase. We can, common stuff like, okay, I want to come over and turn off, my cycle. I want to be able to, edit the channel settings if it's a virtual instrument. I want to be able to open the virtual instrument. And then I've gone through and mapped. So this will now jump to, like, let's say all the Cubase menus. So I hit this button and that's going to send a switch to switch to a different mapping page here. So when I hit the Cubase menus, we can now see that I can now go through and open every function in the file menu. If I want to go back, let's go to the score menu. And let's come over here. Let's go back, and then there's advanced options. So if we now just kind of come over here, and we'll say, I want to, do very audio editing of a particular part. I could just come over here. We'll see the advanced features, and then we could come over and say, okay, I just want to do very audio editing. And this will be like most of the functions that you need to do very audio editing. If you wanted to go to different scoring functions, if you want to be able to do everything that you want for tracking or going into the mixer. And then, okay, I want to come over here and I want to expand, my different mixer types. I want to be able to filter different channels. So I'm kind of working on a big one. So I'm showing it to Steinberg next Tuesday. But once I get it done, I think I'm maybe 65-70% of where I want it to be. But there's a lot of different functions. So, and I wanted to offer it to everyone. So if you just hang out for a couple weeks, we'll see if Steinberg wants to do something with it. But there's probably 2,000 functions that have been mapped out for Cubase already. So, and I'm kind of doing this, and if you want to leave a comment, I'm kind of doing it mostly text-based, because once you get into, like all of the different functions, I don't think icons can really convey what each function does. And this way you kind of feel like you're driving Cubase a little more. So let me know what you guys think. And I'll be showing it to Steinberg on Tuesday. So see what their reaction is. All right, wonderful to see Bernie checking in. Wonderful guitar player. Plays with an A-list celebrity that everyone knows. We won't drop names, but great to see you on, Bernie. He's a wonderful songwriter from Nashville. He's gotten to play with all sorts of amazing people. All right, so Soren asks, says, let me throw out a question again. If I'm working with a third-party piano roll, but I need scale notes, help, the song switches keys along the path, can you figure out a way for me to get the help I want? The information is in very audio and a piano roll, I believe. So see, if I'm working with third-party piano roll and I need scale notes, the song switches keys along with its path. Can you figure out a way for me to get the help I want? The information is in very audio, the piano roll. So if it's in very audio, one of the things that you can do is, let's just come over here. So I'm not sure, that I could help with third-party piano rolls, if you know which one it is. But if you're in very audio, so let's say if we're here, I can, let's say we go to the very audio tab. So I'll just make it full screen so we can see it a little easier. But there is a scale assistant inside of very audio. So I can say, okay, I'm in the key of G major. And then we could say, at this point, we could say, so as I move notes, we can have it filter us from being notes so we could just have this automatically snap the pitch editing. So now I can only put it on notes that have that are in that particular key. So allow me to go to a note that's out of a different key. So if you're in very audio, you can just simply come over here and enable snap pitch settings after going into the editor scale. So let me know if that's helpful, but if you let me know which particular third-party key editor it is, I'm not sure if we have much control over that, but I'd be happy to see if I could help. All right, so Bernie is just asking, I'm still used the new tempo detection functions. Have you already gone over that? Still getting used to them, I'd say. So yeah, we'll show you. So if you want to do like a tempo detection, we'll show a couple things here for you, Bernie. So we'll just import a quick audio file. So let's say we don't know what the tempo is of our particular project. So let's just say, let's drop this project in. All right, so let's say we put on our metronome. And it's not aligned to the click. So what I could do is select this particular event, and let's go to my project, to tempo track, and we'll say tempo detection. And now we've extracted the tempo map. So if we want to come over here, and it will place it into like a 1/4 meter, because we don't assume that all music is in 4/4. And if we want to, at this point, just say, okay, let's make this 4/4. So we look at our tempo, we'll have like slightly different tempos. So if I wanted like another audio file in musical mode to match along with that, I could just come over, let's find a genre inappropriate drum loop here. So now, and I could place this into musical mode, and this will automatically kind of match the tempo. So let's say I want the loop to start right there. So now this loop will speed up and slow down to match the tempo of the track. Now, if I want to take this song that's varying in tempo, and let's say it's varying too much for our taste, I could select it, or we could do this for a multi-track file. Come over to your audio menu to advanced, and we want to say set definition from tempo. And we could do this and store that metadata in the project or within the audio file. Either way will work. So now we could say that roughly my tempo, if we look at it, is like 115 to 120. So let's say I want it to be like 116 as a steady tempo. I'm going to disable the tempo map, and I'm going to put a fixed tempo of 116. Hit enter, and now it's going to play back perfectly at 116 beats a minute. Or if I wanted, so now it's playing a perfectly steady tempo. If I wanted to be 144. If I wanted to be 108. Or if I wanted to be the original tempo, but I wanted to do like a tempo ramp starting here. or I want to do a retard here. Or if I want to just kind of make the tempo a little tighter overall, we could just kind of take the center line here. And then we could compress the tempo changes. So it still has a little natural variation, but maybe not as much on either side. So give that a try. Let me know if that's helpful for you, Bernie. It's great to see you on the live stream. Hope you're well. All right, so we see the real Winslet fan says I'm actually trying to send track CC to the controller, but it looks like I have to write script to copy the target track data to a proxy MIDI track that routes to the controller. Yes, I think you would need the script, the API for that. All right, so we see Gerald Ely just says, Greg, I just found out about the hi-hat foot pedal control in Groove Agent. Could you show how to set that up? So I don't have a continuous controller, but let's see if we can take a look. All right, so, okay, I guess we could use the mod wheel. All right, so let's see if I'm here. For some reason my MIDI controller isn't cooperating today. Let me just... So, we just disable the MIDI remote script, see if that's making a difference. So yeah, sorry, my MIDI controller is not transmitting to Cubase today. Let me see if I could reestablish communication on it. See if I could unplug it. Yeah, so if you want to use like your modulation wheel, let me see if I could just fake it with my MIDI control. So this way, what you could do is just simply kind of use this control to open up and close the hi-hat. Sorry, I don't have my controllers, not... working as expected. Sorry about that. But I think that's, you could use like a foot control or just your modulation wheel, and then you could have the different levels of the hi-hat. So when you actually go to look at the instrument, you'll notice that there's lots and lots of, like, pretty much from, you know, you have all these samples, and this entire bank of samples is all for the different stages of the hi-hat that you could control from the modulation wheel. So let's see if I could maybe... Yeah, so something's weird with my MIDI communication today. So, and I could show it on the next live stream, Gerald, if you want to email me just to remind me. All right, Michael Pierce asked hardware question: with the Steinberg UR series of interfaces, when using Loopback, can you apply live effects to the microphone only? Example, compression to trying to sort out a teaching system for Maria. So yeah, if you come over here, so it basically functions as a multi interface. So when you come over, let's see if I have it. So when you kind of switch between the different scenes, so let's say when you go to the voice, you could have different effects on the voice. So when you come over here to the live stream, you could have an effect that's on the music. So if you wanted to have the daw duck based on the voice, and you could just come over here and so at this point you could just have like a ducker, so that you could have kind of compression and have that automatically duck different elements. So you're able to do that. So this way you could have, and also just like for the inputs, you could have this go directly to let's say we want to listen to this going into the reverb send, I think. So you could have your gate and comp. So you have different DSP for the voice input, different DSP for the streaming, as well as the audio interface part. So it's pretty slick. Okay, so you see Randy says got to bounce for a bit. He'll be back. All right, so you see Radar Band just says yes in the stream deck. All right, you see John Walker says evening from Cosmos Original Records. Thanks for joining today. Always wonderful to see Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. Thanks for being online. Great. All right, so we see the artist knows love saying, hope that everyone's great, and thanks for all you do, Greg. I've hit the like button. All right, whack the like button, says from Uno Memento, says maybe we should make a song about that request. All right, and we see John Barry checking in from the English Riviera. All right, Russ says, thanks, Greg. Seems like I'm doing it the best way already. All right, Rashab Saxena says, can you add volume faders under track names in the project window? I don't want to click each track just to make a small volume adjustment. This would speed up workflow a lot. So I guess you want to see maybe volume and, maybe panners there. So without, it's always here where, as you select, I guess, you could come over, but I'll pass that along as a feature request. But there currently isn't a way to do it, but there's multiple ways to kind of grab your volume here, or a fader, or the mix console. So, but we'll make it, I'll send a request for easier volume and pan control, maybe right in the track inspector. All right, Bratman Studio says, hey Greg, I downloaded the Steinberg SKI remote. How to get the extension from Steinberg? Looks like no update since 2022. Installed on 14 Pro my iPhone. Works better than a long stick. Thanks. Yeah, so it's just kind of, it's been around for a long time, but still works and functions great. All right. And we see Rick, Bratman Studios, saying hello to all the Cubase Zoom brothers. Apparently he's in desperate need of ice cream, so I bet Michael Teams may be able to help with that. So we see from Val says, oh my God, Greg, work on the exact thing I need. Feels like a dream come true. So yeah, I wanted to go overboard and feel like I was, some control surfaces you feel like with control surfaces they're always interesting. Some of them you kind of almost feel like you want to get in a car somewhere. Sometimes a control surface makes you feel like you're in an Uber. Sometimes it feels like you're in a car with your family. Sometimes it feels like you're driving the car, and then sometimes it feels like you're really driving a car with a manual transmission and kind of, driving it to the fullest extent. So that's kind of functionality I wanted to get, where we could just find different functions easier, not necessarily for tweaking plugins, because the Stream Deck isn't really physically designed for that, but to have access to so much information, I think will be really helpful. So let's see, Michael Team says he's thinking hard about the Stream Deck XL. So, all right, and Val says that's great, thanks Greg. Terry Gray has one that he runs with his Avid S1 as a combo. And Val says right now I have the Stream Deck only to trigger key commands. And one of the things I also wanted to do is to make sure I didn't use any key commands that could be modified, so it's almost all entirely through the MIDI remote. So if you have different keyboard shortcuts, that won't affect your keyboard shortcuts when you're using the Stream Deck. All right. All right, so we see Val says, how about icons plus description? I mean, I'm pretty visual and haptic. So, probably, I was thinking of along those lines, but I'm not a graphic genius. But also, let's say if we get into, so you see these are all the different ones I've made, but let's say if we get into the edit menu, and I agree that the icons are pretty, but let's say if we want to, how do we come over to go to your functions and paste relative to cursor, paste to matching track name, paste at origin, split, how do you come up? I think by the time you learned the icons, you could have memorized a keyboard shortcut 4 or 5 times. So that's why I am kind of going more for descriptive based, so that, because there could be so many different functions, move, how to convey all of those things in an icon could be tricky, I think. So let's say if you go to select, select CC and note range, all unselected tracks, events under cursor, select, so I think this is gives you the sense of the command. It may not look as pretty, but I think the functionality is a good approach, but let me know if you disagree. All right. All right, so we see Terry Gray says, I'd love to have that Stream Deck set up, Greg. Hope the bosses approve it. And yeah, so I'm going to be working on some other ones over the weekend as well. It says Val just says we have just the commands, or it will be finished already laid out script for the Stream Deck. So it'll be like I think what it would be like the MIDI remote script in conjunction with the Stream Deck profiles. I think that's what you need to make it work. Okay. All right, so we see Jazz Dude shared Bernie's YouTube channel. He writes some just great, amazing songs. So, privileged to have Bernie on today. All right, so we see Kuthka says I have a push tune. I want to reassign the MIDI pad to make drum pads scale a bit like it would work. Is it imaginable with the MIDI remote? So I mean, you could have the drum pads do trigger different events. But let me know if you wanted to go directly to a scale, but you could trigger different functions very easily. All right, so we see Soren just says, Greg, nice try to answer my short-worded encrypted question. The third-party piano rolls in SynthV, the virtual singer AI software, and when programming it, I would want to help with select notes in it. Yeah, so I don't think that we're going to be able, I mean, hopefully, so, we're outputting the MIDI data. There's obviously plugins that could have their own kind of editing environments. Just like we have the option in Very Audio to have the scale functionality, but we can't really implement that in other third-party tools. Maybe you could ask as a feature request if they don't have it, that maybe they could implement, scales in their user interface. Right? Gerald Ely said, did Greg say genre inappropriate? What a great name for a band. It does sound good. All right, and we have Lawrence checking in from Barn Door Recording from Rhode Island. Great to see you on. All right, so we see from Gerald Ely says, Greg, I want to use an on-off controller like a sustain pedal to open and close the hi-hat. So it may kind of, I will see if, I'm sure I could have my MIDI, I'll make sure my MIDI controller is open for and functional for Tuesday stream, just kind of stop transmitting into Cubase for some reason. But yeah, I think that you could, it may be designed to have varying degrees, of like, because there may be like multiple samples, like 20 different samples at the various stages of the hi-hats versus an on-off, like, A-B type of thing. But I'll see, I have a expression pedal in the closet, and I'll see if I could get that connected and show it on Tuesday's live stream. But if you send me just a quick email brain cramp reminder, I'd be happy to get that all set up for Tuesday's stream. All right, we see Gerald says, thanks, I'll email you the question. Thank you for that. All right, so we see from George on his earlier question about the reverb preset, says, I looked up what Warren Huart did, simply used 4 different reverbs and applied different preset times, or different pre-delay times on it, so no manipulation of the send signals. Yeah, I was wondering how they would do that. It's kind of sending it before. All right, we have Thor Ivar Scowl says, hi, how to create the 1624 quantization from Logic in Cubase. I'm not familiar with, I've never run Logic, so I'm not familiar with what that is, but if you could describe what it's doing, I'd be happy to, try to figure out how to do it inside of Cubase. I'm sure we can do it. But if you could let me know what the 1624 quantize is, if it's doing like dotted, I'm not sure if it's doing dotted values. But if it is like a dotted value, like so if you had a dotted, if you're taking 16 divisions of a beat, turning it into 24. So maybe it's just a dotted value, but if you could explain it to me, I would be happy to try to get it figured out for you. All right, we see Richard Carpenter saying educational. All right, we see from Rashab Saxena says that's a feature request. Of course, I request you to pass it on on the slides. Every DAW has that. Absolutely love Cubase. All right, so we see Val says, I have a few templates, and when I switch between them, the key commands last used are selected. Can I adjust my templates to switch between saved key command lists? So the key commands, let me clear my throat. Hang on. The key commands aren't actually saved with the song. Some elements like the control room are kind of globally set and aren't song specific. So that, when we go to a key command, it doesn't, let's say if you had a song file and it had a key command and it used a key command of someone else and you load that song file and all the key commands are messed up, that, wouldn't be a good thing. So the project file doesn't contain the key command information. It always just uses, it's kind of a static set until it's changed. So whatever song is loaded up, that particular key command, will not change based upon loading or unloading or closing a project. So let me know if that makes sense. All right. All right, so we see from Kapenitsky, it says, I have the Panorama CS12. The experience is quite enjoyable. The only wish is for Cubase, when the tempo BPM changed, it wouldn't interrupt playing. Hopefully it will be fixed sometime soon. So, let me know, because obviously here we have our tempo changes. So let me know if Cubase is interrupting the tempo, if Cubase is being interrupted by the tempo change, or CS12 is. It seems like the controller, shouldn't react to a tempo change, and obviously Cubase does tempo changes. All right, so we see Val just saying about Stream Deck, I can help with the icons. I'm pretty fluent with Canva. Yes, I'm a total graphics idiot. So if I need help, I'll reach out to you, Val. Thanks. Yes, but I was like checking out the free version of Canva, trying to make a quarter note icon last night. And trying to mimic get better looking, like more high resolution transport controls. All right. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped. right. All right, and we see from Kuthka, it says text is a lot of times better than pictures. I think when you go to look at like a template to buy, text looks really cool. But like I bought a Stream Deck Cubase template, and I just didn't like it at all because it's just what it was very kind of surface level for me. And we see Michael Pierce says when you're up to function 200, the icons become confusing. So. All right, so we see Bratman Studio says it's September 12th in the U.S. is Spinal Tap 2. So, all right, so I see Gerald Ely's email. Thanks. Yes, I'm looking forward to. I think I'll go out to the theater to see that one. Okay, so we see from Kuthka 2 says for push 2, it's more like reassigning the note on a pad via MIDI remote. Actually, the pads are chromatic, so unusable for finger drumming. So, there's obviously a lot of, I think most drum pads are kind of, so, it's really something like that. So, I wouldn't think it would make sense. I mean, we could obviously say turn every, C sharp into a D natural, but usually it's going to be, it's much easier. We could do that for like 4 different stages using an input transformer to take various notes, but often it's just easier to take the particular, to set what pitch the controller is transmitting. I think that's kind of a typical design and function of most controllers. Will allow you to kind of switch what MIDI note is being transmitted. All right. All right, so John Barry says, hi Greg, I have a feature request. Recently I found an all.all Cubase song and used SX3 to convert to CPR, but SX is still on the dongle. Do you think we could have this moved to Steinberg licensing? I know it was a really big undertaking to, there's obviously a lot of different calls to the dongle that used to be employed in Cubase 11 and earlier. So all of a sudden it would just, like you do something in a program and it looks for the dongle periodically. So I'm not, and I think the thinking is if you have .all files that you probably have earlier versions of Cubase. So I don't think that they would take the engineering time to put Cubase SX3 on Steinberg licensing. So I mean, I'll pass it along as a feature request, but I think, as we want to always, something that seems, trivial, can take a lot of software, can take a lot of engineering time to do that. So, and with, since the Steinberg licensing, the SX3 came out 2004, 2003. So it's been, 22 years. You've had like 15 years to kind of do it within the e-licenser period. So, but I'll pass it along. All right, Amato Solo says, hello from Orange County, California. Thank you for these live streams. How can I create a macro exporting cycle markers? Okay, welcome. And yeah, obviously our office, Yamaha's in Buena Park in Orange County. And I'm an Orange County native, born in Anaheim. But let's say, I don't think we have to do a macro. So let's say I want to put in a cycle marker here. So I'll put in a couple cycle markers. So let's add a marker track. All right. All right, and I'm just going to hold down Control or Command and Shift and drag, and then we could add the cycle marker and give it a name, like so. So Command or Control plus Shift, drag. All right. So let's say we have our cycle markers here, and we want to export via the cycle markers. So what we can do is just simply go to Export Audio Mixdown. We will see cycle markers here. So we can say, okay, I just want to select all my cycle markers, and let's export it directly to an audio track. So I'll say Export Audio. And now it's going to export based on the length, and we could also choose to name the files based upon the name of the cycle marker. And now you can see that we have each of the cycle markers exported. So again, just when you go to your Export Audio Mixdown, you could export via the arranger track, export cycle markers, or by the main locators. So give that a try right there. And then, yeah, let me know what part of Orange County you're in, just out of curiosity. And thanks for joining us for the live stream, being a part of the community today. All right, we see Michael Teens. Looks like he's going for a UK adventure next year with Scotland and London and Liverpool. Sounds like a great trip. I just want to go visit my friend in Scotland, Mr. Paul Wishart. Used to work with him at Steinberg years ago. Still always loved getting together with him at the NAMM show for breakfast. We actually stayed at the same hotel. I got to have breakfast every morning. It's just great fun. All right, so you see Jazz Dude says would interpret 2416 as 24-bit or 16-bit. It usually doesn't have anything to do with quantizing. But let's see if we get maybe a clarification. All right, so we see Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of limoncello ice cream. All right, thank you very much. All right, so we see from Krapinitsky says certainly Cubase has its logic and it's fine, but it's not ideal for live application like practicing the guitar and wanting to speed up tempos on the fly. So I think you could do that pretty easily. So let's say I want to come here. So once we have this song, so let's say we did the tempo. You know, if I want to come over here and just so we could just kind of slow the tempo down, even if it's so you could definitely do that pretty easily in Cubase as well. All right, Benny asks, is it possible to copy a reverb from a song in Spectral Layers 12 and use it in Cubase 14 Pro? Strange question. So if you have the impulse file from Spectral Layers, so let's say I come in here, because you could extract, let me just see if I could just generate something quickly. Okay, so let me just do a quick drum part. Okay. Okay, now I'll just add a reverb to this and we'll render it. Okay, so let me just add a verb. Okay, and let me render that in place with the verb. Okay, so now we have our file. All right, so let's see if we come over to this file and launch Spectral Layers. And let's see if it puts the de-reverb on a different layer. All right, so if you wanted to now come over here, we could say, okay, if you have kind of extracted the reverb, let's see if we could just drag this. Let's see if this is like the reverb. Sorry, let me just take off my punch in. Yeah, so if you could get it as a layer, you know, if you want to come over, so let's say we're in Spectral Layers, like if you wanted to just take so if you wanted to just kind of extract, so let's say we'll take just like the sound of the reverb here. Okay, so now we could come over here and we'll say new layer. And then if we drag this layer to, I think if we come over here, we could just see if we could drag that out. But if we could just kind of take that, then you could drop that into Reverence as an impulse file. So if we want to just kind of come over here, let's see if it's gonna. Yeah, but I think that we could take that and then you could load it as a WAV file into Reverence. It's kind of a left-handed approach, but I think you might be able to do that. All right. All right, so we have from DJ Stats says, is there a way to remove a picture that has been taken of a third-party VST plugin, or is it just a case of going into the relevant folder and deleting things? So yeah, it's just going to be placed into like the operating system pictures folder under like Cubase images or something like that. So you could just delete it, or if you create a new picture, you could replace the plugin picture with the new one if you wanted to. All right, so we see Kuthka just says that'd be a dream for controller, especially old controller that not assignable. You're limited to 4 MIDI input transformers, and just put MIDI CC input transform into MIDI remote for each pad. Damn. All right, so we see Amato Solos from Newport Beach. It's a beautiful area. All right, so you see Kuthka just also says, can you do it with tap tempo? So I'm not sure if you wanted to be able to adjust like the playback of a song with tap tempo. So, but let's say if I'm here and I was playing this, let's say we have this song and we want to do tap tempo. Let me just solo it. I'll take it out of the loop. So let's say I just want to come here, tap. So that's it. So if I wanted to just change the tempo while it's playing, I could just click on tap tempo. So I think if I hold down shift and just, I could hold down shift plus the space bar and so you could change the tempo just by tap tempoing live as well. So let me know if that's what you want it to see, Kuthka. All right, Amado's Solo asks, in export audio mixdown, what do the options insert broadcast wave chunk, insert XML chunk and insert tempo definition mean. All right, so when we record an audio file, let's say record file and our tempo is 100 beats a minute, we can, when we come over here, we can just, when we do our export audio mix down, so we'll just come over here. So when we see that option, so what that's going to allow us to do is, one, to have the tempo metadata exported with the particular audio file. We could also insert markers into audio files so that you could navigate in other programs based upon markers and extract the markers. So that's the marker chunk. The XML is like data for, okay, is it a pop song? Is it country? Is it gospel? Like those types of metadata information for cataloging your different files. And yeah, so it's just like the different metadata. You could have like your name, you know, the author of the WAV file, that type of information that you could have set up in the preferences. So if we come over here to your preferences or settings, I think it's under general personalization. So you have default author name, default company name, and have that metadata so that that information travels with the audio file. All right, so John Barry says, hi Greg, I have no Cubase VST plugins in Spectral Layers. Is that standard, or do I have to direct Spectral Layers to a folder? So I think that the built-in plugins aren't going to be able to be accessed by any third party or any other applications outside of Cubase. So even if you have a plugin in Cubase, it's not going to show up in WaveLab specifically. While they do share a lot of programs, it's not automatically done. So those plugins are kind of custom tailored for Cubase, and that's why you don't see those kind of popping up into Spectral Layers. It also kind of happens with using VST Connect. You can use like you could use kind of third-party VST plugins for, you know, with a VST Connect remote recording session, but you can't necessarily use the built-in plugins that come with Cubase that are kind of tied to the application. Okay, so we see from Kuthka, it says, is it possible to tap tempo to gradually change the tempo of something like a conductor would do and record that automation? So what you could do is, let's say I'll just come back. I'll just start a new project here. So let's say we have something that's a steady tempo, or if we want to do that, what you could do, all right, I'll just do a new project here quickly, or I'll just take an existing one, so we could do it on, if you guys see it on the whole project. And I'll revert this, turn that starting point. Okay, so let's say I want to come over and do like a tap tempo of this. So what you could do is just set up a MIDI track or an instrument track. So we'll come over, let's do a quick instrument track here. Doesn't, I guess we have one loaded, so I will, let's see if we can just record MIDI here real quick. All right, so use my virtual keyboard. All right, so let's say I want this to, so I'm going to just record on the MIDI track. let's say I want to speed up a little bit. All right, so at this point, let's say I was tapping quarter notes, like one note for every beat. So let's say if we have this and I sped up and slowed down, so we can see that this isn't particularly steady, that they will get closer and farther apart. But at this point, if you go to MIDI, to functions, and we can say calculate tempo from MIDI events, and we'll say, okay, let's begin at the start. I was tapping quarter notes, and now it will calculate a tempo map based on your MIDI information. So let's come over here. Let's add a quick tempo track. And we can see all the tempo changes that can be calculated just based on the actual hit points or the MIDI notes that you just kind of tapped directly in. So we'll use... So now we can see our metronome is lined up perfectly with the MIDI. So. All right. Okay, Anthony Clark asks, hi Greg, what is the best way to have different arrangements of the same project? So we have something called the arranger track, which is kind of perfect for this type of task. So what we could do is just, we'll come over and let's just add an arranger track here. Okay, so I will... Let's just come over here. So with an arranger track, I'll just put it at the top here. And what we want to do is just to define kind of our different parts of our songs. We say this is our verse, a chorus, guitar solo, bridge, and we could have nested parts within a part and parts that are overlapping other parts. So we could come over and just have these different sections. And what I could do now is just say, okay, I want to say, let's just make an arrangement of these. And now when we activate the arranger track, instead of it playing linearly through, you can see it's going to play the A section. And then when it gets done with A, it's going to jump to the H section. All right, so it's just about ready to jump to H. Then after H, it's going to jump to E. So we have kind of non-linear arrangements. All right, so let's say I want to come over here and I want to add. So now what I could do is create a new chain. So say, okay, this I want it to be, and we could rename these Option or Alt, double click to rename. But at this point, we could just say, okay, I want, L to, we could just kind of come over here, and as we keep adding different arranger chains, we could say, okay, I just want to have N twice, followed by D, followed by C. So same song, but now when we play, this will be a different arranger chain. So as we hit play, we start there. And now it's going to, when that finishes playing, we have that playing twice, and it's going to jump. Then I can say, oh, let's make it go back to N next. So it gets done playing D. It will now jump to N and then back to C. So this way we could just have multiple arrangements of the same project. So use the arranger track for that. I think. All right, so we see from Val question, is it possible to have a MediaBay close after double clicking a sample? This is complaining on a high level, so I don't know if it's that much needed. So there's not an automatic function because oftentimes people, there's many people just leave, like, have one screen that's just their MediaBay if they do lots of sound design work. So, I guess you could make a macro to insert into project at cursor or insert into project at cursor and then close the MediaBay if you wanted to do something like that. If that's faster, and you could trigger it from your Stream Deck profile. But if you wanted to do something along those lines, we could say, okay, let's come here into MediaBay. Okay, so let's say we want to, like, we have a snare file here, and we want to, let's say, insert into project at, let's say, left locator. So let's make a quick macro here. So we'll get to your key commands. Sorry, let me just make a new macro. Sorry about that. So my keyboard's not behaving well. All right, so let's just come over and say, okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, so we'll say insert So we'll say insert at the left locator. Let's add that command. And all right, so let's say we have our MediaBay open. So I want to take this particular track and let's run a macro. And then let's see if we, let me make sure I have an audio track selected here. Okay. So you could probably play around. It seems like that should work. But there isn't a way to automatically double click to close. And sometimes actions like that have a lot of other ramifications in software design where doing something shouldn't affect another state of a function. All right, Rob Schmedeke from Tarpon Springs, Florida asks, does bouncing a layer after you have placing it on its own unique track in your project, will you lose its tempo detection data? All right, so let's say we record an audio file here. I think usually bounces will preserve. So let's say playing. All right, we're going to do bounce tempo. Let me take it off the Ranger track. Okay, so let's look at the pool, and we'll see that the bounce tempo should have a tempo of 100 beats a minute. Bounce tempo 100 beats a minute. So let's come over. It's bouncing a layer after you've finished it. All right, so let's say if we I'm just going to copy this down. I'm going to add a blank track here. All right. So we're going to keep our original there. I'm going to, let's say, we're going to call this file tempo bounce instead. All right, and let's go ahead and bounce the selection of that file. Okay. So we go to our pool window. Still has the all right, let me see if so the audio 1 still, this is the file, the audio 01 has still retained the tempo information in it. So we see the file here, which is what we had did a bounce in place, and we come over, this is the bounced file, and that still retains the tempo information. So let me know if that's what you're kind of looking for, Rob. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer on the live stream from Mission Viejo. All right, so we got Artist Knows Love says, please hit the like button, and he wants to give a shout out to Jazz Dude. All right, so we see Fly V wants everyone to take care. All right, let's go. We had a couple questions that were mailed in, so let me get to those. Thanks for all the great, wonderful questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. All right, so the first question we had was how to do step input recording into Cubase. Okay. All right, so step recording is kind of, kind of an old school sequencing. Sometimes people, like I know people that still kind of type in MIDI data and they're like incredibly fast at it. But step entries is an easy way to kind of get data going. So let's say I will come over and let's see if my virtual keyboard will. All right, my controller keyboard's acting up today. All right, so when we want to do step input, let's say we're going to go into the editor here, and we see these three little lines. So as we come to do step input, you know, what we could do is as we go to input, maybe my keyboard woke up. Okay, give me just a second. All right, so we're going to activate our step, and then what we do is we just kind of hold the key down, and then when we release the key, this is when we see kind of our step. Now our step will be based upon our velocity value. So let's say if we want this to be quarter notes, let me just extend this part out. So now I have my quantized value set to quarter notes, and I could just put in my MIDI notes like this. Okay, now as we're doing this also, you know, you notice that now some of the things that have changed when we do step entry is we could just come over, so we activate the step input. All right, and if I want to skip a particular note or beat, we could just kind of hit this space bar and put it in. Now the thing that changed is if we just extend out, hit the left or right arrow, we can adjust the rhythm before we release the note. So if you want to do like really quick chords, and then I want that to be a quarter note or a half note, and now I want the chords to be quarter notes, or I want this to last a whole measure, you could just extend the particular rhythm using the left and right arrows. So it used to be that the duration was fixed as soon as you hit the note, but now the duration isn't determined until you release the note. So, and you could adjust that duration time just by using the left and right arrows. So we can say, okay, now we want to switch to different step value. I want to do a 16th note run here. So now I could and let's say followed by a whole note chord. So depending upon your actual resolution that you have, your snap value, and holding down the shift key, you could adjust the different rhythmic sets. So I believe that was in 12 when it came out, or 11. So it used to be that the duration was set, was fixed before you released the note, so it would always put in like 8ths or 16ths or 8ths. But now you could hold down the shift key to extend the particular length of the notes before releasing the note from the MIDI keyboard. All right, so I had a question. Can you please show how to insert a filter plugin as an insert on all channels in my project at once? I have a large project with up to 90 channels. I'd like to know how I can save some manual repeated inserts. Okay. So let's say we have, do a new quick project here. Okay, let's add a number of audio tracks. Okay, so we go to our low, we'll just come over here to our mix console. So let's say we'll come over here. I'm going to select all the tracks. It will say from, and I'll just, so let's say I want to take track 1 through 24 here, or whatever. I'm going to activate Q-Link or hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. We'll go to our inserts and we'll just come over here. So let's say we want to put a filter on all the channels. Let's say, okay, I want to put a auto filter on all the channels. So now all of those settings were automatically, that plugin was automatically added to the same insert slot for all of the particular channels, all selected channels. Now if I want to edit, I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key and let's edit the settings. So let's say we'll come here. So now that I'm still holding down my Alt or Option plus the Shift key, we can just come over and those settings will be applied. I think I hit the wrong button. Those settings will be applied to all of the tracks as well. So just hold down the Alt or Option, or you could just turn on Q-Link. If you wanted to do it in a temporary state, just come right over here. Say I want, the frequency EQ and all of those tracks. Now just all selected tracks, the frequency EQ will be added to all of them in one motion, one action. Okay, so we had a question about notation. It says, how to get two piano tracks left and right hand to show on a single grand staff and not two separate grand staffs. Okay, so let's say we have a piano part here. All right, so and we'll load it up with Etude. Okay, just all right, so let's go ahead and we'll call this piano, and let's duplicate. All right, so let's say we've done like a left-hand piano and a right-hand piano. So we'll come over here. I'll just do a quick step entry. All right, and let's do a step entry on this, and I'll make this kind of like a low piano voice. We'll make it half notes. All right, so let's say we look at both of these parts. I have low notes here. Let's say we have high notes here, and we go to look at them. They're both called piano. We go to the score editor, and we see that we have two grand staffs, but what I want is the left hand voice. I want my left hand voice in the bass clef and my right hand voice in the upper stave, but I don't want like two different grand staves. All right, so to do this, we can come over to, and why it's doing this is because it sees the name piano, so it's trying to take your piano part and give it a particular, trying to automatically give you the right clef. But sometimes when we're sequencing, we take a different approach. So I'm going to come over here to my settings and go to instrument settings, and we're going to change the instrument. and we'll call it sketch, and we'll just say treble staff for our left hand. And let's say for our other instrument, we want this to be sketch, and we'll make it bass staff. And now we have, when we select both those parts, we could see that it's going to be together as one grand staff. So when we come over to settings, click on the instrument tab, and then you could also just come over here and where it's going to say instrument type, so it's kind of automatically trying to do the correct musical assumption and give your piano part a grand stave, because that's typical for piano notation. But we could overwrite that and just choose under the sketch category left and right hands, and at that point you could see the left hand notated and the right hand notated correctly. Next question was, how can I change the key signature in the notation? Okay, so this is kind of like a drag and drop. So you have different symbols that you can apply here. Our second symbol will be keys. So I think in their example there, sent a screenshot there in a key of A flat. So we'll just take this particular, we'll go down for flats, up for sharps. Kind of makes sense. And now what I want to do is just select that, and we'll see that I could drag it, and I'm going to click right around the stave, right around the time signature, and now we have our key signature. So once you have the key signature set, you can just come over and drag and place as needed. Okay, our next question. It says, I'm working with group tracks and folders. It would be nice if a group track has an option to expand and close the tracks in visibility. In the view situation, most of the time, the group track would do the work I need, saves me from folder just to collapse and expand. Maybe it's a conflict with architecture. Maybe you just don't know how to use Cubase. So there's a couple. So if let's say we had a number of tracks. So currently it's going to be, we could do collapsing on just like the folder, but just as we showed earlier with like, when we had a request for like kind of folder groups, let's come over here. Let's add a number of audio tracks. Okay, so I want to take these audio tracks and let's put them again into, so you don't have to, if it's in a group, when we go to like, the macro, and again, you could assign a keyboard shortcut to trigger this, but we could say selected tracks to new group and folder. So let's say, okay, this is our drum bus. So now when I'm in the mixer and we activate, let's say we had the left zone turned on, which is usual. So we could do kind of the folders. So the folder includes the drum group. And if we just kind of come over here, we could say hold down the shift key, and then we could only see the contents, and this is organized by the folder and not by the group. But we could also just come here and say, okay, we have everything. I want to come over here, and we may be able to do a project logical editor preset as well. So let's say I have me add some other tracks and add them to a separate group. So let's add some more audio, and I think we could also approach this from the project logical editor. Okay. So we can say that these tracks here, I'm going to route to a different group. All right, and we'll call this vocals. Okay, so now we go into our mixer. We have All right, let me take those tracks out because they're still within the same group. Okay, so now let's look at the mixer. So we should have so we have our guitar group, but it's not in a folder. So let's say I want to take everything that's going to the guitar group. I want to hide everything that's not going to the guitar group. So let's see if we could get that going. So let's go to the Project Logical Editor. And we'll say we want to transform and we want to say we want to take our container type is equal to a track, and we want the output contains our guitar group, and then what we want to do to that is, let's come over here to our track operation, and let's see if we could set the invisibility. Okay, so let's come over and I'm going to select those tracks that are routed to the guitar group, and we're going to say contains not guitar group. All right, so let's go to our channels and track visibility, and we'll say hide selected channels. Okay, so let's say we have in our mixer this, and if I did this right, then we could just see what happens if we all right, and then we're going to hide those particular channels. Let's see, we should be able to. We just look under visibility. Okay, so we'll say hide selected channels. Okay, so let's see if this does the trick. So it should do that as a post process, but then if we had to go to the configurations, we could just say show only or hide. All right, so let me just change the condition here. Okay, so let's say it's going to contain guitar. So then we can just hide those particular channels. So you could also experiment around with using the project logical editor for that. All right, let's jump back to live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, you can send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay. All right, we see Jazzy Lamel joining. So we see clarification from Anthony Clark. Says, thanks, Greg. What I meant is how to have the whole project files that have different arrangements and can go back and forth between them, can be different samples and change the other view of the project. Yeah. So I think I mentioned this on the last live stream that, we used to have like songs and arrangements as like kind of two separate entities where an arrangement could be within a song, but it was pretty confusing for a lot of people, and people, maybe at the time when we were doing it, people weren't quite as computer savvy as they are now, but it was pretty confusing for a lot of people. It was like, and they save a song and an arrangement, and they want to have all the arrangements that were in the song, but they just have an arrangement file. So, but yeah, currently there isn't a way to have kind of nested like projects within a project. All right, we see from Brian Sawyer, says, learning great stuff today, Greg. Biggest one for me was extending the MIDI notes with left and right arrows. See, Jazz Dude brings up great point. Step input is great for help with orchestral composers and doing ostinato stuff. So you're going like string parts. So a lot of people think of step entry as primarily being for maybe like arpeggios and like dance music and EDM stuff, but it's going to be used, as Jazz Dude mentioned, it's a great kind of working case scenario is, I have to do 17 notes from here to here, and, being able to do like different runs and ostinatos and just kind of repeating string patterns over and over again, that the step entry is a great tool for that. All right, so we see from Soren, just says, Greg, when exporting an MP3, there's an option to get high quality mode. It shades out the sample rate of the MP3 choice. What exactly does a high quality mode do and mean? So I think that a high quality mode is going to be a fixed sample rate, but it's just a different algorithm. The algorithms are constantly evolving to have better quality. It's not something that's once the compression algorithm is set, that afterwards they say, okay, that's good enough, and we're not going to revisit this ever. It's the algorithms for compression and decompressing, lossless and non-lossless, compression, are always evolving. So it's just a later algorithm for that. All right, I think we're at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that can sneak in. I'll just kind of check the live feed, make sure everything is good. All right, looks like we're caught up. Let's see if there's more questions that sneak in. Give it a couple minutes here. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. All right, we'll give it a minute or two. All right, so we see Altine Lee saying thank you, I believe from, is it Austria, if I'm not mistaken. Thanks for joining us, being part of the community today. All right, Michael Teens has granted me 5 trophies. Thank you very much. All right, we'll see if there's other questions. Give it another minute. There's usually about a 20 to 30 second delay from when I talk to when you guys hear me. So. All right, so we see from Anthony Clark, says, I see, thanks. Other question, how to get a guitar MIDI notes overlap at the end length to do notes bend, and what is the best resource to find for instruments production? All right, so if it's going to be like, you know, on the same pitch, so let's say if we have a guitar part, let's just open up one here. Okay, so we'll just come in. So let's say we want to draw in. Okay. All right, so let's say we have, all right, so let's say I set a guitar with how to set a guitar MIDI notes overlap at the end length to do notes bend, and what is the best resource to find? So I'm not sure if you, at the end of the MIDI note, so let's say if we're doing this, if you want the note, so let me just move some of the notes around here a little bit. Okay, so how to set a guitar MIDI notes overlap. So let's say, so I'm not sure if it's overlapping on the same pitch or if it's overlapping on different pitches. But if we have something, let's say along the lines of, let's move this here. So if, let's say if these are overlapping and you want to do, at the end length to do notes bend, I mean, if we have the note expression on, you know, we could adjust. I'm not sure if you want to do something along these lines, or you say, okay, I just want to, and say, okay, we're going to take this particular note and just so if you wanted to do something like that, I mean, you could draw in pitch bend as well. So let's say if we see our pitch bend, but it's, you know, you could record that data, but if you wanted to come over here and just say, okay, I want this pitch bend to go down, you could do stuff like so. Let me know if that is kind of what you want to do, Anthony Clark. I guess the next question is, what's the best resource to find for instruments production? So probably the best source if you want to get like the most contemporary information, and you have to kind of take all tutorials, I think, with a grain of salt. There's a lot of people do kind of music production tutorials on YouTube. I think that's it's like just a fountain of knowledge and a wealth of knowledge that's available. But, there's a lot of people that just kind of keep doing things not for the sake of the song, but it's just like, I learned a trick and I'm going to use this trick and show this trick to everyone I know. And sometimes that trick may have worked for them in one song and it may not work for you or for your techniques. So I think you could get exposed to a lot of different techniques watching other people work, seeing how people work differently than you, even if you're a very seasoned user. I know I've been in the room with Hans Zimmer and he's like, I want to see how a hip hop guy runs Cubase because he's probably doing it differently than me. It's like, I have my way and I'm very ingrained and I want to see another trick, So different things like that can, just exposing a different tip or trick, I think is a great way. I think, buying something in books, I think YouTube is probably the best resource. I think by the time it's in the book, it might be a little old. But recording engineers are kind of notorious for, it's like, I remember when I was working in a big studio in New York, and one engineer always felt that, it was, this one microphone, this one very particular mic, and he had a #1 record with it, and he was going to book the same studio in the same room with the microphone upside down with the same serial number microphone because he was convinced that it was the microphone that made all the difference, and that's why the song went #1. So he's going to be using that microphone. He would, book sessions specifically just for that microphone, and didn't achieve the same success later. And he didn't figure out that it was because the record company pushed the song, and there's a really cute girl in the video. And that's why it was kind of successful and had lots of promotion. He was convinced it was the microphone. So there's a lot of people that have methods that could be based on stuff like that. So just kind of wade through what you go through and what you take in. All right, we see from Val, says, what a stream, learned a lot today again. All right. All right, you see Tim K says, thanks for all the help and tips and tricks. Take care, everyone. So thanks for joining us. See Val says, thanks, Greg, for your constant effort towards this program we all love. All right. All right, so I think we are out the end of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. I hope that everyone's learned new tips or tricks. And if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. And we'll be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.